get those frontline workers, you know, whether they're in the community or whether they're in hospitals, the necessary protection they need to get to be safe. And so we've been compiling a number of maker responses that, you know, I think you guys have seen, and we'll make sure you have all of these links. You can go to tinyurl NOM COVID resource to get to one of our documents that has all of the different connections and links. And we've also been trying to collate all the efforts that you guys have been doing, which is a really, really difficult challenge we've had because there are so many efforts that have been going on. And so we have a compilation that's a community compilation of different maker efforts. And I really want to give a shout out to Claire Caccioli in Maryland, who's been helping us to pull that together and also map that. But it's tremendous. And I'm like Dale, you know, I am sitting from my chair just looking and in awe of what all you guys are doing. And the point of this call is not to hear me and Dale talk. It's really to turn it over to you guys and have you guys talk. So I will stop chatting and I will put some of those links into the share box and also make sure that you guys have them. But I want to turn it, I guess, now over to Sabrina and the folks at the Open Source Medical Supplies. Do you wanted to start with Jad'an first?
Yeah, let's let me just take a moment to those of you that are joining after we started. This is, you know, a session, a conversation on organizing the maker response to COVID-19. We're here, I'm Dale Dougherty, and joined the co-host of Dorothy Jones-Davis from Nation of Makers. And we want to talk about one of the groups that really sprang up quickly. First is a Facebook group, and now is its own nonprofit. Let me introduce Jad'an Johnson, who I think comes to us from Florida. Last time he was there. Hi, Jad'an, how are you? And we need to get you off mute there. There we are. And so explain to people that maybe haven't heard a whole lot about what the Open Source Medical Supplies Group is doing, and welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Dale. So Open Source Medical Supplies, I mean, incidentally, we started as a Facebook group. It was rapidly growing, you know, as a way of wrangling makers, medical professionals, engineers, just everybody having this wholehearted conversation about how is it that they can play a part in helping to support and address medical supply shortages. From that process became this very dire need for somebody to actually help to facilitate the conversation. And a big part of that facilitation was documenting what was working very well and what wasn't working very well. So one of the ways we've been documenting is through our medical supplies guide, which gives some insights on standards and protocols around different medical supplies. And we also give recommendations for different things that makers can actually produce within their own maker studios or, you know, their different spaces. And then the next big thing we ended up working on, which Sabrina kind of led, was the development of our local response guide. And what the local response guide helped to do was to provide context for different people who are looking to get started at the local level on the different, you know, kind of steps or boxes they need to check to make sure that they could build robust and well-supported programs that would actually create some level of meaningful impact within their communities. So what started as a Facebook group, now powered by about like 300 volunteers, has evolved into this massive movement around documenting and providing best practices about rapid response in pandemics like COVID-19.
That's great. That's great. Well, let me next throw it to Sabrina Merlo, who worked with me for many years on Maker Faire in the Bay Area, but also started our playbook for Maker Faire after her work in Oakland at the Park Day School. And one of the things you got drawn into the OSMS group is to write a playbook for local response, which is it's just wonderful, really, to see all the. I have to say, one of the joys of this, and this is, I don't lose sight, it's a terrible time for everyone in the country, but it is really connecting a rebel force together that many of us have known each other for a long time, and to see names pop up and what people are doing, it does, as Dorothy said, make you very proud to know that you're part of this community. So welcome, Sabrina, and you're probably calling in from your home in Oakland, right?
You are right. Thank you for inviting us, Dale. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you. Yeah, these are, it's remarkable times. And so we were, again, I think the local response guide was an organic response to what was happening on the ground, as well as the incoming questions into the Facebook group that was, the open source medical supplies Facebook group, which is now over 70,000 people. But that was the impetus for deciding that we needed to compile a repository of best practices and some guidance that we were gleaning from what was coming in that way, and as well as the sort of more direct knowledge that we were gaining from leadership groups around the world, connecting through Get Us PPE or Nation of Makers, or people signing up to be an open source medical supplies branded local group. So we just published our second rev of the local response guide. And we are, it is an ongoing document. We are learning, building, adding to it, and sharing out new versions as fast as we can manage the workflow.
Yeah. Can you give us in a nutshell some of the steps to get started, or in your community?
Sure. I mean, I think that we added a section this last time on culture and approach, which might be helpful for people just in terms of orientation and the maker mindset that goes into this kind of this endeavor that's a combination of networking and an expression of extreme resourcefulness. Like what is available to you, and how do you get there quickly? So there's some road mapping around thinking about networking and how you can do some inventorying around needs. What do people need in your community? This is an incredibly local problem. This is not a problem this information is not available from a nationwide wide level. As you were describing with Plan C, this is about a different, very local approach. So we're just trying to provide a skeleton for people that might be useful for how to think about doing that inventory, how to think about building that network, and then giving them some tools where they can apply that in whatever custom circumstance they have.
Yeah. It's a very different, in some ways I see two patterns. One is where the makers are reaching out to the medical facilities and talking to them. And the other pattern also, which I wrote about in a Seattle story, of the local hospital reaching out to the makerspace of Seattle makers and saying, we need help. And in some ways there's two formats I'm seeing. One is this aspect of a really incredible distributed manufacturing model where people are really developing really interesting platforms and ways to distribute this making load across multiple locations. And then there's the more community organizing model, which is about how do we connect that group that's doing that around the digital fab with the group that's doing the sewing, with the group at the university that might be doing research and prototyping of this, and how, to the extent that all of those efforts might be activated and amplified by a coordinator approach. And I think our next guests are really good examples. No, that's great. Yeah, we'll bring them on in a moment. But let me just emphasize that, because I think one of the characteristics I see of self-organizing groups often is they just jump in and they're just doing stuff. And sometimes they don't look up and say, is anybody else doing this? And how do I connect? And it was certainly one of the nice things that I think the open source medical supplies group did, is gave people almost a depot, to kind of come in and connect in. Well, let's introduce Ian Cole and Candy Cole, both from Orlando, Florida. Happily to me, they're Maker Faire producers, Maker Faire Orlando. And so they have a lot of experience, I think, in this. But you also run a makerspace and have been involved in this for many years. So tell us, kind of, how did you initiate a local response?
Initially when all of this happened, we noticed lots of people in the community, makers got to make, right? They just get out there and they just start making stuff. But then I was seeing that people were making things that hospitals or clinics wouldn't necessarily want or accept. And that kind of fueled our fire for the direction we want to go. But I'll let Ian fill you in on what he did next.
Yeah, so I think we, the early days of this, right, way back several weeks ago, there was a big question of what's the right action to take. And the day that the open source medical supply local response guide was published, we saw that and we said, okay, this is really good. We have a community of Maker Faire producers, right? People who already know how to work together. We already know our roles. We already know our strengths. And we already know how to organize around a topic. And we saw that local response concept, and we very much are running the model that Sabrina referenced, where we're trying to be good community connectors. We're trying to figure out what people need, not necessarily telling them how to do everything. So one of the things that we do when we talk to local groups is we ask them, what can't you buy? Because if they can buy it, great, let them do it, right? We don't need to buy everything. But if they can't find something, that's where we can go leverage our networks and work on that to bring those resources to bear and help them go faster. Our mission includes the words activate and amplify, and I'm glad Sabrina heard that message from us when we were talking last week. I think Candy's got a really good story of one of the things we've been doing from a makerspace level related to working with one of the local groups.
Like as Sabrina was mentioning, connecting the different groups together in the community to work together. We saw a real supply chain issue. It takes a long time to sew a mask. It's not an insignificant amount of time. And when you need thousands of them, minutes really, really make a huge difference. So there was another group in Orlando called Orlando Face Mask Strong, who had a whole network of sewers and had a plan and had been sewing a lot of masks. And so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel or try to compete. So we partnered with them and we started using our lasers and some other lasers around town to cut the fabric ahead of time. And so now the sewers get a pre-cut kit of 50. So now they get enough stuff to make 50 masks and they can just keep sewing, and it saves them a few minutes per mask. So they're getting churned out a lot faster. They've sent thousands already, most of them to local hospitals, but some have gone to other essential workers like the Orlando Police Department and the fire department, EMS, and those guys. So it's been amazing what we can do when we utilize our Maker Faire network of friends and everybody works together.
Ian and Candy, what's been the medical response? What's the interface look like there?
Complicated.
Yeah.
We've had all spectrums. We've had the groups that just don't know how to talk to us at all. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we're not a supplier and we can't, give them a price and a time frame and they can't process it. We've had others, and in Orlando, there's large health networks. So there's not a bunch of like smaller regional hospitals. So there's really just a couple of big players. Orlando Health really got it. They ended up with someone on like their strategic planning team that was talking to us. I think they were thinking about this really as how do we do something different? And they engaged us by meeting in the middle. And we had lots of great dialogue about exactly what did they need and how we could do it. So for example, they had a supply of the H600 surgical fabric that the University of Florida wrote an article about for making masks from, but they didn't know how to get them sewn. And so we brought actually it's one of our Maker Faire sponsors. We brought them to the table because they had industrial sewing capacity to do it. But then what was funny is their machines were actually too industrial. So we stole the sewing machines from the makerspace and took them over and recruited some other, our science center had some sewing machines from a lab that they have. And so we sort of put all the resources in the center.
And now they've recruited their own volunteers. Now they've got 25 volunteers coming in to help them sew masks in their facility every day.
Yeah.
Orlando Makers, do you have a central site for your maker group? Khaki Flynn is asking that.
So we are running a local response group as part of open source medical supplies, but finding Facebook groups is not always the easiest thing.
Yeah.
So for Orlando, we also stood up a really simple page at orlandofightscovid.org just to make it easy to find the resources. But most of our organizing is happening in two places: the local open source medical supply Facebook group, and then we also use for all the like actual organizing, we do that in Slack channels under our nonprofit Slack.
Okay.
We also, one of the important things when he mentioned orlandofightscovid.org or .com, either one, there is a copy of the Orlando Health model that we built with them that's shared on there if people want to look at that, and it gives them a place to start with their own healthcare facilities in their own areas.
Good. Great. Sabrina, that's a question for you. Christina Flores asks, has the maker response been the same globally, or has it been U.S. been uniquely poised to act? I know some examples, but I think you can tell.
I mean, in terms of the maker response, we've been put in a bigger hot seat than other places we've been talking to around the world, in the sense that we are actually having, like we were on the phone or on a Zoom yesterday with some people in Perth. Or that was the day before. Yet this morning we were on with Taiwan. They're just not in the kind of, they're not seeing the breakdown in the supply chain that we're experiencing here in the United States. I mean, it is, we are uniquely pressed.
And I think that's right. Both the combination of the problems with our health system and our inadequate response from the federal government have put us in this position. But I do want to point out there's groups in Spain.
Oh, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, there's groups in Spain like Coronavirus Makers.
Yeah.
Belgium sent in, Caleb got a group in Belgium, and said this is the big story in the country of how much effort the makers are putting in there. So I'm pretty sure, I live here, and all of us here are from the US, but and so we're seeing that, but it is reflected. And I think other points is, this is it's hitting globally, but not all at the same time at the same rate. So there will be people to follow us and people ahead of us. So
that was an interesting experience talking to the Perth guys, because I had this realization. Right, you're right. It was wrong for me to exclude Europe in the extent, but that we're building a roadmap that others may need in the next following months. That it's not, I'm not just chasing I'm not just 3 weeks behind in terms of tracking and putting stuff in the local response guide, but we're also 3 weeks ahead of other parts of the world. And when I look at who's downloading the local response guide in the back end of our little box platform, it's remarkable how global the reach is.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for us to just get at least the perspective that, this has really never been done before at this scale, and the kind of things that people are doing. And what, in a sense, a boon it is for us to discover we have this capacity. I hope we don't lose it or allow it to atrophy, once the COVID-19 seems to go on the wane. But that's kind of why I was writing about the Civic Response Corps and these other things. It's not just about the relief efforts or the medical equipment. There's many things that have been disrupted by COVID-19, and like a hurricane hitting an island, the rebuilding and the recovery takes many, many years. And I think that's, unfortunately, some people think we will turn a switch and go back to life as it was. But I would say that, maybe some parts will, but it's also an opportunity for us to reconsider how life could be different, life could be better. And one of the big lessons is how could we do things more from these kind of self-organizing civic groups? Well, let me turn to James. James, do we have anybody that has their hand up or a question that you could bring on to ask our panelists so far?
Yes, it looks like we've got some in the chat here.
And Matthew, what a great, I saw your question in there, and I'm gonna, if we can queue you up to come on too and ask that, I think it's a really good point. So do you want to bring who that is, James? If you can.
Let's see.
Figure out who has their hand up. Maybe while you do that, Dorothy, let me ask you this question. Are you seeing this widespread throughout the country?
Oh yeah, I think we definitely are. I will say, it's interesting, sort of what Sabrina said, that, the virus is passing through our country in different ways, right? And so we actually have swaths of our country that are largely rural and may not have seen the numbers yet. And it's been interesting to have conversations with folks from there, because there's a number of people that are getting geared up, knowing that the wave is coming. But I do think that there, across our country, all the states, including the District of Columbia, you just see a large response. And I think internationally, you are also seeing that response to, what Sabrina was saying as well. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Well, let me, Matthew, I think we have you, at least it looks like you're muted. There you go. Matthew is from the Design Kitchen at Rice University, and they're working on a number of projects there. But Matthew, you put a question in the Q&A. I'm glad. Thank you first for joining us, and maybe you could explain a little bit what you mean by needs finding.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for letting me ask my question. There was a comment about what you can do in a local community about helping, and for people who are new to needs finding, which would be finding a project or a problem to work on, it can be really difficult. My question is there maybe 3 things to consider when looking for a need in a local community that you can tackle, or maybe just 3 things you can keep in mind in looking for a problem to solve?
Three things.
Yeah.
Well,
Just give me one. Jad'an.
I feel like that it has not been difficult for people to find the needs. I think a lot of people are seeing it in their social media feeds, in their next door communications, seeing posts from, at least in my community in the San Francisco Bay Area, was present immediately. Nurses posting to Nextdoor, can someone please give me masks? My husband is going to work and they have no PPE, and I will drive to your front porch and pick it up from you. It was a very, very personal, desperate pleas that were coming through feeds. So I think in some ways that was one of the originating, so there's opportunities like that, person to person. And then once you sort of tap into that and start asking the questions about what design do I make, what's the best resource for that, then you start to find these channels of vast information around opportunities. And there's platforms, but go ahead, Dorothy.
No, I was going to say, I think the other piece of that, to even go a step further, is like, think about the least of these. And what I mean by that is that the other thing is, once you look around, it's kind of easy to see the need right around you. But sometimes we're only in our own insular world. And I think an example of this is the Navajo Nation has been going through extreme trials with just getting very basic things. And this is certainly it still was the case before COVID, but certainly in the midst of COVID, there's a lot more need for protective equipment that are on reservations and in other sort of underserved communities, and even closer than maybe, for some folks, Navajo Nation, it's a little still far away. But I think even if you look closer within your own communities, you can think about places where, certainly people are clustered together closer than they should be. These are places like homeless shelters. These are places that are, for example, different addiction clinics and places like that. And those places are also searching for PPE and for help and for need. And so I think when you think about need, it's a complex thing. And sometimes the people who are the most vocal get the help first. So once you do realize the close to you people, I just want to urge people to think beyond that, because that's the wave that we're now seeing a lot more of need coming, are folks that didn't have a platform to speak.
Yeah. Ian, were you trying to get in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you think about needs, I think that last dialogue was sort of the very direct need, and that's very obvious. I would say if you're looking for other ways to take action in your community, one of the things that we look at is, what tools or resources do we have at our disposal that aren't activated yet? And so that's a way to look and say, hey, we tripped across the laser cutters cutting fabric for the sewn because we were sitting there with laser capacity going, wait, there has to be a way to activate this. Or any person who comes along and says, hey, I want to help, there has to be a way to activate them. And so sort of another type of need is the need of activating a resource and pulling it into the fight.
Mm-hmm. You know, Matthew, it's probably a different example than what you're asking about, but ventilators is kind of an interesting example of initially, and I think Guy Conti started, you know, the open source medical supplies group. He was like hot on creating an open source ventilator, and as were many makers. And you know, it's a more complex problem than PPE and things. So, you know, Guy helped to redirect the efforts towards something else. But in talking yesterday, a group out of Robert Reed, a group that had tested, you know, examined the open source ventilators projects. There's about 80 of them. And, you know, one of the things that's coming out is, well, ventilators are made out of components. And there are some components that particularly are needed that makers could do perhaps. And there's a lot of other pieces. So, you know, as you explore, you kind of see sometimes things are, you know, don't go down that road, go down this road, you know, supply, you know, at some degree, if more people make ventilators and the supply chain is still the problem, you end up with unfinished ventilators. So it's looking at what the real problems are and what opportunities there are. Jad'an, did you want to weigh on this question before we move on?
No, I think everything was addressed.
Okay, good. Let me, James, could you bring on Jay Margulas? Jay is from DePaul University in Chicago. And I think it's a great example of building a network of makers to solve problems. And we'll get him on in a minute. There's a lot of good comments in the chat room. I appreciate it. There's Jay. Jay, you'll need to unmute yourself, and if we can see you, that would be awesome.
How about that?
There we are. Hey, Jay, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
You look like you're in the same place you were last week when I talked to you. So, as we all are.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
so just give us an idea of what happened in Chicago.
Sure, and Illinois, I should mention as well. So I am the faculty director of makerspaces at DePaul University. I teach in our industrial design program there. And I think of probably some importance for some of this stuff is that I've been making makerspaces back when they were called hackerspaces. And that was like starting 12 years ago or something. And so I know a lot of people kind of like in the area. And about 3 weeks ago, we liberated all of our machines from DePaul. I distributed them amongst all of our student employees and some faculty members, including myself, all around the city and the suburbs of Chicago. And quickly began networking together a group. I'm just reading off notes because I'm a professor and so I have notes. Sure. We quickly, I have a board of advisors for our makerspace network at DePaul that includes people from Chicago Public Schools, Chicago Public Library, Museum, Science and Industry, Northwestern, well, no, not Northwestern, Chicago Peace Fellows. And so I quickly reached out to them and we got a lot of people from all of these places that have machines. And, you know, I think instinctually all the people that work there are helpers to start working with us to fabricate stuff. And then that quickly snowballed into bringing in people from churches, folks from Northwestern, University of Chicago. And our goal was basically to meet short-term needs until the supply chain catches up, right? And the hope was that the supply chain would catch up and then I'd get to go back to making my little doodads instead of making PPE. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's catching up yet. And in fact, the supply chain is in many ways disrupted. And so in conjunction with that, when we were reaching out to folks, I started reaching out to folks that I know in the suburbs, folks I know in Peoria, Rockford, all around the state. And we also started raising funds. And because DePaul is a nonprofit, we were able to raise, and we're a large, trustworthy institution. We've been able to raise about $75,000 so far, and I have another couple $100,000 in grants out right now to give out to anybody who joins our network so that they don't have to spend their own money fabricating things but we can pay for it for them.
That's great, Jay.
Thanks. So, the way it works is basically, on the fabrication end. So we've got this funding coming in. On the fabrication end, we take our the materials and we get them delivered directly to fabricators. And we follow a distributed fabrication model that focuses. It's kind of like based on mesh networks. So the idea is that you have nodes, and the nodes, if one node gets sick, that node might go down, but then all the other nodes are able to take the burden from who they're delivering to and alleviate that burden. Similarly, the other nice thing about the node model is that, for instance, right now out in some of the suburbs, we don't have as many institutions asking for things. And so then we're able to flood nodes in the city with assistance that they need so that they can get more PPE there. And then we have, I can't mention their names yet because their lawyers won't let me, but we have other large corporations that are currently helping us as well. And so like the model that we have it's resilient, because if one thing gets sick, the rest of the thing kind of takes care of the problem. It helps us develop local connections with institutions. And some of like the hospitals, at least in the city, are still saying there's not a problem, they don't need PPE, but the doctors are saying, yes, we absolutely need PPE. And so by developing those personal relationships with local nodes, we're able to get the stuff directly to doctors.
So actually, Jay,
yeah.
tell us how you're getting stuff directly to doctors.
Oh,
That's
sure, yeah.
a great part of your story.
It's in my notes, actually. So
Okay, all right.
Go ahead to it. So we have 4 now primary methods of getting things to doctors. One is that a lot of bike couriers are out of work. So we have bike couriers delivering things directly to hospitals. The second is actually we are working with, go ahead.
Okay, you were going to say, don't you deliver to the doctors' homes?
We deliver, yeah, oh yeah, and we deliver directly to doctors' homes, and then they take them into the hospital. And if somebody wants to try to fire doctors right now, I suppose they can go ahead and try to do that. So they take it directly into the hospital. Yeah, and then we're working with Get Me PPE with the medical students. We have a partnership now with the city of Chicago, and so we're delivering some, although not all of our stuff, to the United Center, which is a distribution center. And then we actually have a lot of veterans. So Ray Dukeson has built a really great network of veterans who are delivering things all around the state as well. Yeah, so, and we're doing this as a state because that's generally, it seems like how the solutions have been rolling out, like states are kind of forced to fend for themselves, and it gives us the ability to share resources with people in our state, and if we have, too many of them. So that's what we've kind of been doing. I can talk about what we're, like in the next week.
Let me just point out, there's a question or a comment from David Culler. He says, I'd like to get some discussion on how this gets from one maker at a time to community scale. And I think that's what you've done here, right?
Yeah.
Is you've actually connected the individual makers up, and you have a network. And so talk a little bit about that. I think that's what's remarkable here.
So we don't really think about things in terms of what people can do, but where they're geographically located. And that gives us the ability to spread out to more and more communities. And so if you, and that also reduces the likelihood of transmission and all of the other risks. And so we have, like, for instance, a Lincoln Park node in Chicago, and that Lincoln Park node builds up a community of people that already know each other, and then they get too big and then they splinter off and they become their own node. And so they're like cells, and they just keep splintering further and further out. And it seems like a very elegant solution to a problem that's essentially doing the same thing, which is that it's multiplying based on how many people are localized in one area. So we're doing the same thing, just in a positive direction, and it just organically grows. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Now, one of the things that when you were telling me about what you were doing, you're at home with a couple of 3D printers. Where did they come from?
Yeah, I mean, my 3D printers came from DePaul, and from the nonprofit makerspace that I run down here in the south suburbs as well. And other people have 3D printers from libraries, and they're taking them out of the libraries. And so we have a section on our website that's basically, it says how to liberate your equipment from an institution. And it's a script that you can send to the director of whatever you're a part of. And then you take your equipment out and you put it in your home. Because the last thing you want people to do is like everybody converging on a library or everybody converging on a school.
Right. And I wrote about the Maker Mask project in Seattle, and they created a makeshift 3D printing facility in an Episcopal church. And I asked them, where did they get where'd you get your 3D printers? And they said, from school makerspaces. The schools have closed. They didn't need them. So they went out and harvested them and put them to use. But it's kind of amazing, Dorothy, to think about the trend, to have those printers even in the school, in a makerspace. Nobody believed we'd even make that happen, right? Let alone then pull them out and apply them to making face shields.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that's actually been pretty remarkable to see is that, we went from no one having a 3D printer to, we pushed really hard to get, we said 3D printers, should be in schools. We should have maker spaces in schools. We should do all this stuff. And we didn't know that this is going to be that we would have a use case for them being there beyond just education. And I think you think about, I've also talked to a lot of students, right, who found themselves out of school, and they're also making, the number of pictures of kids and youth that were making, masks and other, 3D printing or sewing or doing other things to make PPE or fill needs in their community is remarkable. And I think that, they also have that maker spirit that we've, been trying really hard to galvanize. So it's kind of really strange in some ways, this world that we've created where everybody actually is a maker. And I said that to you the other day. I remember saying, we worked so hard to get everyone to think of themselves as makers, and now we all are. And I think everyone now sees that and really recognizes it in a way that we hadn't. And I wish it wasn't this virus that made that happen. But I think it is just I keep saying it's a remarkable time because I'm still in shock at how amazing we are.
Jay, one question we've been thinking about as editors is do you have a sense of what what you're producing? One of the things that hurts us a little bit as a community is this is so distributed. We have so many sources of production and distribution. It's hard to keep track. Any sense of what your production rate is?
Yeah, it's about, as of last week, at least, it was around 6,500 face shields a day. And now we're doing masks, and I don't have a beat on that. The other thing that we recently did was we bought all the PETG we could find in the area, and we have manufacturers going to be making it for us. And we're stamping a flat pack shield at $1,800 an hour now. So as many as you can, as fast as you can is the mantra. So that's
Hey, James, if you could bring on Bill Hemphill. Bill is from East Tennessee State University. I wrote about him in my first COVID-19 piece, but he's making face shields through a laser cutter, and he's really cranking them out. If we could promote him on. But while we're doing that, I have a question from Jesse McKenna here. It says, sourcing materials has been the biggest challenge we've had in manufacturing 3D printed face shields, transparent sheets and elastic in particular. Jay, I remember you saying that you ran out of the fabric for elastics, and what was the solution you found in Chicago?
We got a donation of bike tubes, and then you can strip the used bike tubes and you can put them in a pressure cooker, which is essentially an autoclave, to clean them. So that was Eric Landau and his wife Sarah Rice who came up with that idea.
Oh, that's great. Bill, welcome.
Yes, sir.
Tell folks a little.
Now I'm in my late.
What's that?
I'm sorry. I'm done for the day. I am home now. I'm in my lazy boy. I noticed I still have Christmas trees behind me.
Okay. It sounds like you don't have a very good connection. It's at least a bit garbled. Maybe we'll work on getting you in the next one. Okay, Bill? Because I think it's been broken up.
I'm at home. I'm not at.
Right. No, I know that. Yeah. But if you want to just talk, we'll see if we can hear you, but I was having trouble with the connection there. Jay, let me ask you this. Do you, and I think I weigh in as well, because one of the things I'm really interested is there's more than highly skilled makers involved in this response, right? There's all kinds of people, and some that are getting trained on the spot to do this work, right? What's your experience with that, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I guess I could say here because we're doing it for sure, is we're gonna do a pilot program with 100 DePaul students where we're gonna have them fabricating masks with materials that we've bought them, and a lot of them don't know how to sew, but I happen to run all the makerspaces at DePaul, so I can teach them how to do that with student employees and then have them do that work. But yeah, people are learning on the spot, and that's
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I had any a sense of like bringing people up to speed who want to help.
Yeah, there was definitely a day last week where I had the thought that we needed a full-time orientation person because we were recruiting people so fast and getting them up to speed was hard. We've actually had small companies that have joined the fight, and it's kept some of their employees from being furloughed for another week or 2 weeks, which is huge. And often that company just didn't know how to get engaged. They either didn't have, one of the pieces of the puzzle, or they didn't know what to do. And so by activating, the network that we have and really teaming up with people like Moonlighter in Miami and, the Maker Faire producers in Miami and the teams in Tampa, we've been able to solve things and then kind of move those solutions around the state. Not quite to the level that Illinois is doing there, but it's pretty neat to see an idea or somebody join in one area and make a contribution, and then everybody goes, wait, we need to do that everywhere else, and sort of very, very quickly spin that around, and then also share it up through open source medical supplies and through Get Us PPE. So that's something we've been geeking out a little bit, is just that kind of that fast innovation transfer that's happening that the maker community is really uniquely suited to do, that I just don't know a lot of other communities that are ready to take something so quickly and just pump it around through the network through all of the great friend relationships that we all have from doing fairs and working in spaces and working in orgs together. So
yeah,
it's good.
Yeah. Dorothy, you answered this question from Vanessa Mayoras, if I'm saying that right, but there's actually a good number of answers to the questions given in the Q&A, but it's something that's come up quite a bit, is rural areas. They kind of know they're going to be behind urban areas in terms of getting supplies. They sometimes have a bunch of other issues. What are you hearing about the sort of civic response in kind of rural communities?
So I think, it's definitely something that I feel like a lot of, and Vanessa's question was a great one. She said that in rural regions, the access to PPE is also obviously limited, but that, even though makers can be useful, a lot of the facilities are a little worried about accepting PPE from makers. And I think you see this in major areas as well as rural areas, but perhaps in rural areas where there are not as many hospitals to sort of learn from, you see that. And I think, what we've tried to do is create pathways where we have what we call medically reviewed designs. And so in partnership with the open source medical supplies group, in partnership with hospitals across the country, we're trying to bolster that sort of listing of what designs have been accepted by hospitals, in the hopes that we can take that data and say, hey, these other 5 hospitals that are major hospitals that you consider yourself a part of, sort of a network, or that you look to for advice, are doing this, and that this is something that we can contribute, that other hospitals have taken these types of supplies, and that they're more acceptable. We've also partnered with I'm very excited that the federal government has actually gotten engaged in a way that perhaps we haven't seen in a little bit. And so the NIH, the Veterans Administration, America Makes, and the FDA have all kind of come together with the NIH 3D Print Exchange to actually accept designs from makers and manufacturers. They're all 3D print designs, but they also are doing a medical review process, and that has been really helpful for a lot of makers. We've heard a lot of makers have been able to take a design that NIH has said is medically reviewed as something that could be used in a medical context, and then said to a facility, hey, I have this great design that's been reviewed by NIH, or it's been reviewed by the open source medical supplies group, their medical review team, or it's been reviewed and used in 2 other hospitals, and saying, yes, this is something that could be valuable to you. I think, some of it is really like anything else, it's getting to the right person. And I think that this is where our, our scrappiness as makers really serves us well. I mean, I think a lot of makers are like, okay, cool, you're not the right person, and then knock on the next door. And I think there's a lot of training we've developed.
Well, that's why I like Jay's example of delivering, PPE to the doorstep of a emergency room doctor who's grateful to take it in and wear it. I've had stories on doctors creating their own PPE, it's one doctor at Roseville, California, goes to Maker Faire with his son, and they made a PPE out of scuba gear and scuba mask, sorry. And he said, I was a maker before I was a doctor. So, the thing that, one hand, you do, none of these institutions are monolithic in their response. You have to kind of press different ends and find it. The other thing that's kind of true that I've sort of felt throughout this is conditions are changing so fast. Often they're not aware of the reality that's hitting them. Yes, they would like approved devices, but Bill Hemphill, that I tried to bring on earlier, if you read the story about him in East Tennessee State University, said, the local hospitals, particularly those in the mountains near him and rural communities, were really panicking about the supplies. And when they saw someone locally produce them, he said they actually didn't need them right away, but they felt better that they could procure them from a local source. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of multiplied in the thousands across America right now. Is some of the problems we have is that supply chain extends way beyond our borders, and we can't get parts, and we can't actually make the things we need. Let me ask James, do we have anybody waiting? I see some raised hands. I'd love to bring people in for questions in our last 5 or 6 minutes. So lots of good. We'll save the chat. We'll record this. Kaki Flynn, I think she's from Florida. Kaki, unmute yourself, and if you want to be on video, share your screen. There you are. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I can share my screen. Hold on 1 second.
Or turn on. It doesn't matter. Whichever you feel.
You guys can hear me, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So I've been stand-up paddleboarding today. That's necessary, right?
Yeah,
It is. It keeps me far from people, so I'm looking a little scrappy. I'm not kidding. I'm literally in the Walmart parking lot because I'm on Amelia Island, and that's what you do. You go to the Walmart, and we can't go inside, so now we're all just hanging out in the parking lot. I'm kidding. I'm kind of kidding.
Okay, what's your question?
So my question is, so I'm excited to see Florida people, and I literally just created the website. I just registered for the website, ameliamasks.us. And so Orlando and Tampa people, how do I connect with you guys? Or I may not even need to. You know what I mean?
I think you saw their website up there. There's contact information through there.
Yeah.
So honestly, if they're makers, they're accessible somehow. So
that's right.
Just reach out and let them know you're doing something. But it's kind of I think the one side I want to say, and this goes back to Sabrina and other things, is a lot of this is you have to learn a little bit to get up to speed on your own, and then you begin finding other people. They don't have time to handhold you through a lot of getting started processes. That's why they try to document things and share it. Some groups do. Jay, you may have more help there for others than some. I don't know, but it's you have to. We're sort of a group of initiators that then have to kind of make some of the connections possible to join. James, do we have another person?
Yes, we're bringing Joel Leonard on.
Joel. Hi, Joel. Unmute yourself.
Okay,
Joel.
good. Hello, everybody. I guess this is a good place for me to be standing. I'm out here in my garden. I'm really concerned that that we're focusing on PPE, which is definitely needed, but I think we need to start transitioning into other things that are going to be essential and important for us to consider as we're looking at supply chains and the food, and also all the food banks and all that are being depleted. I think maker spaces have an option to pivot to making starter kits in the gardens, making raised beds, and helping people get their community gardens off the ground.
Yeah. Okay, Joel, thank you. I've seen, it's amazing the food pantries are really being hit very hard right now. Food is a big issue. And I think there's not just the traditional maker community, but there's a number of other, the slow food movements and other groups out there that are very focused on food security and other things. So I think you raised a good point too, Joel, that this is medical supplies is really the first wave of need here. There are going to be many others coming along, including how to restart small businesses and other things that I think we don't know. James, do we have time for maybe one question?
All right, here we got Lee Atkinson.
Hi, Lee. Get off your mute. Unmute yourself. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Hi,
so,
Lee.
Hi, Goodell, and guys and gals. I guess we've had a long few weeks here. Wanted to share just a little bit about what's been going on here in the central Piedmont area of North Carolina. We have a number of maker spaces around here, and a lot of people have joined in the past our Burlington Maker Faire Burlington. And of course, this year we weren't able to do that for various reasons, including probably COVID. But we were sort of inspired to see whether or not we could actually do something for our health system. And here in North Carolina, I don't know if it's the same in other states, but we have a health system which covers multiple counties. And so, you may have one in a metropolitan area that reaches out to the rural area, and the same in some other place of the state. So all of our doctors are usually under one umbrella or another. And so what we decided to do was just go straight to the hospital. And we were lucky enough to talk to the right people and said, hey, well, do you want this? And they looked at a prototype, and then we had a little negotiation, and finally they said, yes, we'd like this. It's a high quality product. And of course, we're looking at the face shield that NIH put out, and now FDA is recognizing, I think, but I'm sure NIH is looking at approved it anyway. And it's that part that has the little crown at the top, and we had to make some adjustments in the bottom so we could get the curvature because our plastic was different thicknesses. But I just made some phone calls to some of our local area maker spaces and said, hey, would you like to do this? And everybody jumped on board, including some rogue people who weren't part of maker spaces. So all of a sudden we had materials purchased and donated, and we had people who are ready to do 3D printing, and it all sort of came together. And we're in the middle of producing a sort of a stopgap delivery to our local system of 1,000 high quality face shields to Cone Health, which is here in North Carolina. And they're very happy to have it. We've gone through several reviews, and they really like it. And I think the amazing thing is that for years we've all sort of done things and known about each other, but this is the first time 4 maker spaces have come together to do one project. And I'm just really excited about that we figured out how to make that happen.
That's great. Lee, thank you. We're coming up on the hour here. I'm going to just throw it to Dorothy for a minute for a closing remark. Dorothy, we have to follow up on this. We probably can't get it all in today, but sourcing materials is a question, and a lot of makerspaces. I mean, Jay raised money at DePaul. A lot of makerspaces are 100% volunteer on this, and they're paying for materials out of their own. and so we have to be thinking about how this how we can make appeals to get funding behind some of these efforts. They can't go on their own.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're working on now. So that's a great way to end, because the project we're working on actively to try to get, there's a lot of donors that are trying to, of course, donate PPE, but we've been working with a subset of donors that understands what makers do and what our value is, to try to get some of them to donate specifically to makerspaces dollars that will help offset the tremendous cost and the tremendous gift that makers have given to their communities. It's a work in progress, and so if you know any big spenders, you want to send them my way, I got a deck for them. But it is something that we're really, really working, and we've also been working with the suppliers themselves. I am very proud to say that, Nation of Makers, and I will send a special shout out to our board member, Chad Ellish, who is working really carefully with a lot of plastic suppliers, cloth suppliers, all types of suppliers, to try to negotiate deals with suppliers to get the cost down, to sell us things at cost if possible. And, a lot of people are obviously trying to use medical grade PET, which is, of course, the highest standard for this type of equipment. But, it also costs a lot. And so, we really are trying to work all different angles to work with the suppliers themselves, to work with donors to try to get them to understand what makers do and how they can help the chain, the supply chain for us. And we're just trying to work every different angle. So look soon, hopefully, Get Us PPE will actually have an opportunity for makers. I will, of course, make everyone aware of that when you know that more. But we're trying to work on some really exciting initiatives going forward. But this is definitely the next challenge that we have, and really setting up, resiliency for spaces. And I will say, I think one of the things that's really exciting is the next wave. So I had a conversation with an organization that was contracted with the government to help with some of the long-term planning beyond COVID, right, for the next thing that happens. And I will say, they were talking to me because they finally see that makerspaces could be part of the long-term solution. And that's really, really exciting. So I think, thank you to everybody that's not only on this call, but thank you to everybody in our country, all the makers who will listen to this after, for all the work that you're doing, those long hours, the money that you've spent that you're not sure how you're going to get back. It is worth it. And we're going to try to make sure that we do our best to support you in future endeavors. And we're hoping that the efforts that are going forward will show the government and lots of other entities how amazing the maker community is.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Dorothy. And, I want to thank everybody for joining. I mean, this is a great turnout. I'm really happy this sort of worked the way. We will try to schedule another one for next week and let all of you know about it. In the meantime, I'd love to hear from you. If you have a story, I'll read through the chat. There's some really good comments in there, but I didn't get to read them all in detail. But I think it's really helpful for us to understand what you're doing and to tell that story out so other people can learn from it. Everybody has a unique twist and adaptation, a modification, and customization of this. So please let me know. I'm dale@make.co if you want to write me. And thanks again, Jay Margulas from Chicago, Ian and Candy Cole from Orlando, Dorothy from the DC area, and I'm from the Bay Area. We'll see you in a week or so, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks. Thank you, James, too,
Yeah.
for
Thank you, James,
producing
for
this.
being our
Thanks, James.
Bye, everyone.